The obsidian chamber was a cathedral to silence, a void carved into the heart of the Cathar Dominion's capital spire. Its polished black walls drank the light, reflecting only distorted, elongated specters of the figures assembled within. At its center, a holographic dais shimmered, replaying the silent, impossible footage that had paralyzed an empire. Upon a throne of cooled magma and solidified starlight sat Apex Strategos Kalen, his multifaceted eyes, usually burning with the cold fire of command, now clouded with a profound and unsettling stillness. Before him, the Dominion's highest council, warriors, scholars, and diplomats, stood like statues of basalt, their collective gaze fixed on the ghost of a battle that had shattered every pillar of their understanding. The air, thick with unspoken fear and wounded pride, was a physical weight. For 3 full rotations, they had watched the recording loop, each replay deepening the chasm of their disbelief. The projection showed the Vorlag's swarm, a tide of shrieking, chaotic metal and jagged energy, crashing against the ordered formations of the Dominion's grand fleet. The Vorlag were a plague, a force of nature driven by a rapacious hunger for resource and territory, and the Cathar had met them with the unyielding certainty of their own supremacy. Their warships, forged in the fires of 1,000 victorious campaigns, were paragons of martial design, vessels of honor and overwhelming force. Yet the recording showed them failing. The disciplined lines buckled, the energy shields flickered and died, and the proud, angular hulls of Cathar dreadnoughts were torn asunder by the sheer, unending volume of the enemy. It was a massacre, a brutal equation of attrition that the Dominion, for all its strength, was losing. Kalen felt the phantom sting of every loss, the echo of every warrior's final cry across the comms. His fleet, the instrument of his will and the symbol of Cathar dominance for centuries, was being systematically erased. Then it appeared. From a fold in spacetime that did not tear or shimmer but simply opened, a vessel emerged. It was a phantom, a sliver of absolute black against the void, featureless and smooth, devoid of any discernible weaponry, engines, or markings. It was not large by Cathar standards, no bigger than a mid-range cruiser, yet its presence warped the battlefield. The Vorlag, in their frenzied assault, seemed not to even notice it at first. The ship drifted, a silent observer to the carnage. The Council had analyzed this moment endlessly. The ship's energy signature was a flat line, a whisper against the roaring symphony of the battle. It was a ship that, by all known laws of physics and engineering, should not exist. It moved without propulsion, it shielded without emissions, it existed without broadcasting its presence. General Vaughan, his carapace scarred from 100 campaigns, finally broke the suffocating silence. His voice was a low growl, the sound of grinding rock. "It mocks us," he rasped, his massive claws clenching and unclenching at his side. "It watched our finest warriors perish. It waited until our defeat was assured, and only then did it act. This was not an act of salvation. It was a demonstration, a threat." He gestured a claw at the hologram where the lone, dark ship finally moved. It did not fire. There were no lances of light, no torpedoes, no kinetic slugs. Instead, space itself seemed to bend to its will. A Vorlag dreadnought, bristling with weapons and vomiting plasma, suddenly contracted. The starship, a mountain of armored alloy, folded in on itself as if crushed by an invisible hand, shrinking into a point of impossible density before vanishing with a faint, violet ripple in the fabric of reality. There was no explosion, no debris, no radiation bloom. Just absence. One by one, the Vorlag ships were unmade. Some were stretched into shimmering, two-dimensional ribbons that faded into nothing. Others were encased in bubbles of distorted spacetime, their furious energy discharges frozen and silenced within, before the bubbles winked out of existence. The Cathar sensors, even in the degraded recordings, screamed with impossible data, gravity singularities being born and dying in microseconds, temporal fields fluctuating, dimensional shearing on a scale that should have torn the system apart. The lone ship moved with a liquid grace, a predator of serene, horrifying efficiency. It did not destroy the Vorlag fleet, it erased it. Within minutes, the roaring chaos of the Vorlag swarm was gone, replaced by a profound, echoing silence. The few surviving Cathar vessels drifted, crippled and scarred amidst the ghosts of their comrades. And the dark ship, its work done, simply hung in the void, its energy signature once again a perfect, placid null. It had annihilated a force that had shattered a grand fleet, and it had done so without firing a single shot, without taking a single scratch, without revealing any comprehensible technology. "A threat is an understatement, General," countered Archivist Lyra, her voice a soft, precise counterpoint to Vaughan's gravelly tone. Her slender form was draped in the silver robes of the lore keepers, and her gaze never left the impossible vessel in the hologram. What we witness defies our understanding of the universe. Their method of energy generation is non-existent, which means it is something we cannot even conceive of. Their manipulation of spacetime is not a crude projection of force, like our own gravitic drivers. It is an intrinsic function of the vessel itself. They are not using tools to shape reality. They are the tool. She turned her gaze to Kaelin, her multifaceted eyes shimmering with a mixture of terror and intellectual awe. To call them a threat is to assume we comprehend their motives. We do not even comprehend their means. It would be like a microbe calling a star a threat. The star simply is. Elder Thrax, his ancient carapace etched with the lines of diplomatic treaties and political gambits, shifted his weight, the sound echoing in the silent chamber. And yet this star chose to act. It intervened in a Cathar conflict, in Cathar sovereign territory. It revealed a power that dwarfs our own and then did nothing. It has remained in the Tenebrous system, silent for 3 rotations. It has not hailed us. It has not advanced. It has not retreated. This is a political act of the highest order. It is a statement of capability delivered with utter silence. They have placed the next move upon our board, and every possible move carries the risk of extinction. The weight of their words settled upon Kaelin. His mind, trained for strategy and the clear calculus of war, was lost in a fog of unknowns. The Cathar way was built on the bedrock of honor, strength, and clarity. An enemy was met with force. An ally was bound by oaths. A challenge was answered. But what was this? It was not a challenge. It was a cosmic refutation of everything they were. Their strength was insignificant. Their honor was irrelevant. Their clarity was shattered. He had spent his life believing the Cathar Dominion was the apex of civilization in this galactic arm, a bastion of order in a chaotic universe. That single, silent ship had exposed that belief as a fragile, arrogant dream. "They saved the survivors," Kaelin said, his voice quiet but carrying the immense gravity of his office. The council fell silent, turning to him. "The logs from the Retribution and the Iron Claw are clear. The ship did not simply erase the Vorlag. It precisely excised them from the battle space. Its fields of influence never touched our vessels, not even the ones in direct contact with the enemy. It was a surgical operation on a stellar scale. There was no collateral damage." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "That is not the action of a mindless force of nature, Archivist, nor is it the pure, contemptuous demonstration of power you describe, General. It is the work of a supremely intelligent, disciplined, and controlled will, a will that chose to preserve Cathar lives." Vaughn grunted, a sound of grudging acknowledgement. "A fattening of the prey before the slaughter, perhaps. They show us mercy to lull us into complacency." "Or," Lyra countered softly, "they operate on a code of ethics so advanced that it mandates the preservation of life, even in a conflict they are not a part of. Perhaps their inaction now is a sign of respect, allowing the bereaved and defeated party the dignity of making the first diplomatic move. Or perhaps they are waiting for us to reveal the location of our homeworld by warping away," Thrax added, his pragmatism a chilling counterweight. "We are paralyzed. To flee is to show weakness and potentially lead them to our heart. To attack is suicide. To communicate is to reveal ourselves to a power we cannot possibly match, to surrender our sovereignty before a single word is spoken." The dilemma was a perfect trap, a cage of logic and fear. For 3 days, the highest minds of the Dominion had been caught within it. Kaelin had felt the crushing pressure of his legacy, the weight of an empire that had never known true fear of an external power. Vorlag were a pestilence, but a known one. This was something else entirely. This was the terror of the unknown, the humbling realization that one was not alone in the universe, and that one was, perhaps, not the most powerful. He looked back at the hologram, at the silent black ship. It was so simple, so elegant. Its design spoke of a profound confidence. A culture that could build such a thing had no need for ostentatious displays of power. Its very existence was the ultimate stake. The ship that shouldn't exist, asterisk, the censor analysts had dubbed it in their initial, frantic reports. The name was chillingly accurate. It existed outside their reality, a visitor from a higher plane of understanding. Kaelin rose from his throne, the motion drawing the immediate, focused attention of the entire council. He was the apex strategos. The final decision was his. The paralysis had to end. "We have debated the nature of the ghost in our midst for long enough," he declared, his voice resonating with renewed authority. "We have projected our own fears, our own pride, and our own ambitions onto a silent enigma. We have behaved like fledglings staring into the sun, blinded by its brilliance and terrified of its heat." He began to pace the edge of the dais, his heavy footfalls the only sound. "General, your warrior's instinct sees a threat. You are not wrong. A power this great is a potential threat by its very nature. Archivist, your scientific mind sees a mystery. You are not wrong. To understand them is to understand a new reality." Elder, your political acumen sees a complex diplomatic challenge. You are not wrong. Our every move is being weighed. He stopped and faced them, his gaze sweeping over each council member, demanding their fealty not just to his office but to his reasoning. But we have all failed to consider the most fundamental truth presented to us. We were defeated. Our fleet, our strategy, our technology, it failed. Our empire was on the verge of losing a vital system, and our pride was moments from being shattered. We were saved. That is not a projection. It is a fact. He let the uncomfortable truth settle in the chamber. The entity in the Tenebris system has made no demands. It has issued no threats. It has shown no aggression toward us. It has only demonstrated a capacity beyond our comprehension and then waited. There is only one response that honors our dignity, that satisfies our need for knowledge, and that addresses the potential threat without resorting to blind aggression or cowardly inaction. He looked toward the shimmering star map that filled one wall of the chamber, his eyes finding the blinking rune that marked the Tenebris system. "We will do what we have not done in 1,000 years, Kalen declared, his voice ringing with the finality of a command that would alter the course of their history. "We will ask for an audience. We will go to them not as warriors nor as supplicants, but as equals seeking understanding. We will present ourselves, the leaders of the Cathar Dominion, and we will look into the eyes of those who pilot that ship, and we will learn the truth of their intentions." A murmur of shock and dissent rippled through the council. General Vaughn took a step forward, his mandibles clicking in protest. "Apex Strategos, this is an unacceptable risk. To place the entire command structure of the Dominion within their grasp, it is a fool's gambit." Kalen turned his gaze on Vaughn, and the general fell silent, cowed by the cold fire that had returned to his leader's eyes. "The greater risk, General, is to remain here in our fortress of ignorance, cowering before a shadow. They could have destroyed us. They did not. That is the only piece of solid evidence we have. I will build my strategy upon that foundation of fact, not upon the shifting sands of our fear. Prepare my flagship. You and Archivist Lyra will accompany me. Elder Thrax, you will govern in my stead." He looked back at the frozen image of the impossible ship. A decision had been made. The paralysis was broken. But as the Dominion's formidable machine began to move once more, Kalen felt a cold dread coalesce in his primary heart. He was leading his people toward a new frontier, but he did not know if it was a frontier of enlightenment or one of absolute, final oblivion. The silent ship in the Tenebris system held the answer, and the Cathar, for the first time in their long and storied history, were no longer the masters of their own destiny. They were about to meet the creators of the ship that shouldn't exist, and the universe would never feel the same. The journey to the Tenebris system was a silent, tense affair. Kalen's flagship, the Indomitable will was the pinnacle of Cathar engineering, a vessel that had pacified entire rebellions and shattered pirate fleets with its overwhelming presence. Now, it felt like a primitive relic, a gilded spear being carried to a negotiation with gods. It slipped out of hyperspace at the system's edge, its powerful sensors already focused on the lone point of darkness that hung in the void near the system's primary star. The ship was exactly where it had been, unmoving, silent. The remnants of the Vorlag fleet were gone, not even dust remained. The space was clean, sanitized, as if the battle had never happened. Only the drifting, wounded forms of the Cathar survivors told the true story. On the bridge of the Indomitable will Kalen stood beside Vaughn and Lyra, the command crew working with a strained, hyper-focused efficiency around them. The main view screen was dominated by the image of the dark vessel. Magnified, its surface was a seamless, non-reflective material that seemed to absorb all energy. It had the organic smoothness of a river stone polished over millennia. "No response to our arrival, Apex Strategos," the communications officer reported, his voice tight. "No energy fluctuations, no change in their posture." "They know we are here," Lyra murmured, her eyes wide as she studied the data flowing onto her personal screen. "Their passive sensor capability is it's not reading our emissions. It's reading the tiny gravitational distortions our ship's mass creates in spacetime. They are watching us with the universe itself as their sensor net." Vaughn's claws tightened on the railing before him. "Witchcraft, dishonorable. It is merely a different understanding of physics, General," Lyra corrected gently. "One as far beyond ours as ours is beyond that of a cave dweller striking flints together." Kalen ignored their exchange. His focus was on the ship. The time had come. "Open a channel," he commanded. "All frequencies, broadcast in the clear, use the universal mathematical language of the first concordance, identify us and state our purpose." The officer complied. A stream of pure data, elegant and undeniable, flowed from the asterisk indomitable will asterisk. It was a message of peace, a formal request for dialogue from one sovereign power to another. For a long, agonizing moment, there was only silence. Kalen felt the thrum of his own hearts, the collective held breath of his bridge crew. Had he miscalculated? Was this to be their end, ignored and then erased? Then a response came. It was not a voice or an image. It was a data packet of staggering complexity and purity. It flooded their systems not with hostile intent, but with information. It contained a perfect, lossless translation matrix for the Cathar language, both its modern form and all its archaic dialects. It contained a full spectral analysis of their ship, their crew's biology, and the atmospheric composition of their homeworld, all gleaned from passive observation. It was a demonstration that they had understood the Cathar long before this moment. And at the end of the packet, a simple, elegant message appeared on the screen, translated perfectly into the formal high tongue of the Cathar court. We acknowledge you. Your request for dialogue is granted. We are the emissary. Please state your preferred protocols for contact. The bridge was silent. The sheer effortless superiority of the response was more intimidating than any weapon. They had not just translated the Cathar language, they had shown they understood its deepest cultural nuances. The term emissary was not a simple name, it was a statement of purpose. They are asking us how we wish to proceed. Thrax's voice crackled over the comm from the capital, his tone one of utter astonishment. They are ceding procedural control to us. Kalen felt a flicker of something he had not expected, respect. This was not the behavior of an arrogant conqueror. This was the calm, measured diplomacy of a power so secure in its position that it had no need for intimidation. They are honoring our ways, he said, a realization dawning on him. They know how important protocol is to our culture. He turned to the communications officer. Reply. State that the apex strategos of the Cathar Dominion, accompanied by his chief military and scientific advisors, will board their vessel in person if they will have us. It is the highest honor we can bestow. The message was sent. The reply was almost instantaneous. We would be honored. A docking port will be made available. We await your arrival. Vaughn moved to Kalen's side, his voice a low, urgent whisper. Apex strategos, this is madness. You cannot board that ship. It is a potential trap. It is the only path forward, General. Kalen replied, his gaze locked on the screen. They have shown us courtesy, we will return it. To do otherwise is to show fear, and fear is a currency they will not respect. He straightened, the mantle of his office settling firmly back upon his shoulders. Prepare the shuttle. We are going to meet the crew of the Asterisk Emissary Asterisk. The shuttle ride was the longest few minutes of Kalen's life. As they approached, the seamless black hull of the emissary shifted. A section of it didn't open like a door, but rather retracted and folded into itself, creating a docking bay with the fluid grace of living tissue. The interior was suffused with a soft, white indirect light, and the air, once they docked and the ramp lowered, was a sterile, neutral environment, perfectly calibrated to their biological needs. Again, a sign of their profound knowledge and consideration. Kalen, flanked by Vaughn and Lyra, stepped onto the ramp. The interior of the ship was as shocking as its exterior. There were no hard edges, no visible machinery, no conduits or panels. The walls, floor, and ceiling were a single, continuous surface of softly glowing white material. It felt less like a machine and more like a sculpted hoe. Load out bone. The silence was absolute, a stark contrast to the constant, powerful hum of a Cathar warship. At the end of the docking bay, a figure waited. As they drew closer, Kalen's mind struggled to process what he was seeing. It was a bipedal creature, slender and surprisingly frail in appearance. It wore a simple, dark blue uniform devoid of rank or ornamentation. Its skin was pale, its head covered in a short mane of dark hair. Its face was a collection of soft features, dominated by two forward-facing eyes that seemed to hold a startling depth and intelligence. It was a human. Kalen recognized the species from deep archive files, a minor race from a distant, unremarkable star system, noted for their chaotic internal politics and primitive, brute-force kinetic and fission technologies. The archives classified them as a pre-ascension species, barely a footnote in the grand galactic census. This small, soft-skinned creature could not possibly be the master of the vessel that had just unmade a Vorlag navy. The dissonance was staggering. The human offered a slow, deliberate inclination of its head, a gesture their translation matrix had likely identified as a sign of non-aggression. A voice, calm and melodic, emanated not from a speaker, but seemingly from the air itself, perfectly rendered in the Cathar tongue. Apex Strategos Kalen, I am Captain Eva Rostova. On behalf of humanity, I welcome you aboard the Asterisk Emissary Asterisk. Vaughn tensed, his combat instinct screaming at the sheer absurdity of the situation. This creature, this human asterisk, was the captain. He could snap her in two with one claw. Lyra, however, was mesmerized. She saw past the fragile biology to the being behind the eyes, a being whose species had somehow leaped from primitive rockets to rewriting the laws of physics. Kalen held his composure, meeting the human's gaze. Her eyes were a deep, dark brown, and they held no fear, no arrogance, no malice. They held a profound, ancient calm, a stillness that mirrored the silence of her ship. "Captain Rostova," Kalen said, his own voice sounding harsh and guttural in the serene environment. "We have come to seek answers. Your vessel, your actions in the Tenebris system, they have raised questions that shake the foundation of our dominion." "I understand," Captain Rostova replied, her expression unchanging. "Please follow me. We believe clarity is preferable to speculation." She turned and led them down a corridor that seemed to form as they walked, the white walls flowing and reshaping to create a path. The effect was disorienting, yet beautiful. They were not walking through a ship, they were being guided by it. They entered a chamber that Kalen could only describe as a viewing room. One entire wall was not a screen, but a perfect, real-time window into the void outside. Stars were sharp and clear, and the bruised, battered form of the asterisk Indomitable will asterisk was visible in the distance. In the center of the room was a simple, dark table and several chairs that seemed to grow from the floor to accommodate them. "Please," Rostova gestured to the seats. The Cathar hesitated, then sat. The chairs molded perfectly to their much larger angular forms. "You are human," Vaughn stated, unable to contain his disbelief. "Our records indicate your species is emergent, technologically adolescent." Rostova met his blunt statement with a small, unreadable smile. It was not a smile of amusement, but of deep, weary patience. "Your records are not wrong, General. They are simply out of date. Humanity has experienced a period of significant nonlinear development." She folded her hands on the table, her posture one of relaxed, open dialogue. "You wish to know why we intervened. The answer is both simple and complex. Did so to prevent a greater loss of life." "You mean Cathar life?" Vaughn growled. "No," Rostova said, her voice gentle but firm, carrying an authority that transcended her physical form. "We mean all asterisk life, including the Vorlag." This statement stunned the Cathar into silence. The Vorlag were a blight, a swarm to be exterminated. The concept of their lives having value was utterly alien. "The Vorlag are a destructive force," Kalen said, his voice measured. "They consume, they destroy. They follow no honor, no code. They are a plague upon the stars." "They are a species in unimaginable terror," Rostova corrected him softly. She gestured to the wall window, and the starfield outside dissolved, replaced by a vast, intricate galactic map. It was a living map, pulsing with the light of countless stars and the faint, glowing webs of hyperlane roots. One large section, a dense cluster of stars, was highlighted. "This is the Vorlag home cluster, or rather it was." She manipulated the map with a simple gesture. The highlighted section began to darken. It was not a gradual dimming. Stars at the edge of the cluster simply went out. They vanished from the map, leaving behind patches of absolute final black. The darkness was spreading inward, a tide of nothingness that was consuming the entire cluster at a terrifying speed. "What is this?" Lyra breathed, leaning forward, her scientific curiosity overriding all other emotions. "A stellar plague, a chain of supernovae?" "Nothing so natural," Rostova said, her voice taking on a somber, heavy tone. "We call it the silence. It is a phenomenon or an entity we do not yet fully understand. It does not destroy matter in any conventional sense. It erases it. It erases matter, energy, information, even the quantum echo of what was once there. Where the silence passes, there is only true, absolute null. It is the cessation of existence." She zoomed the map in, showing the frantic, chaotic vectors of countless Vorlag ships fleeing the advancing darkness. Their flight paths were not a coordinated military expansion. They were a panicked, desperate exodus. They were running for their lives, their entire civilization collapsing behind them into nothing. "The Vorlag you encountered were not an invasion force," Rostova continued. "They were refugees, the last survivors of a dying species, driven mad by horror and loss. They were lashing out at anything they saw, like a drowning creature pulling its rescuers under. Their aggression was not malice. It was the final, agonized scream of a people watching their entire history be erased from the universe." Kalen stared at the map, at the creeping black void that was swallowing a civilization whole. The foundations of his reality were cracking, one by one. The Vorlag were not the enemy. They were the victims of an enemy so vast and terrible it defied imagination. His grand fleet had not been fighting a war, it had been slaughtering the desperate survivors of a cosmic apocalypse. The shame of it was a physical blow. "And your weapons," Lyra whispered, her mind racing. "The way you made their ships vanish." Did not destroy them, Archivist, Rostova explained. The emissary is not a warship. The fields it generates are not weapons. They are containment and translocation tools. We folded the spacetime around each of their vessels, creating isolated pockets of reality. Within those pockets, we stabilized their crews and shut down their ship systems non-lethally. We then moved them, all of them, to a sanctuary system, far from the silence and far from established territories where they can be given aid. The revelation was a thunderclap in the silent room. They had not killed the Vorlag. They had saved them. They had performed a rescue operation of such breathtaking technological and ethical sophistication that the Cathar could barely comprehend it. They had pacified a maddened, rampaging fleet without causing a single casualty. General Vaughan, the hardened warrior, the butcher of 100 systems, slumped in his chair. His entire life, his entire code of honor was built on the glory of combat, the necessity of destruction. He had witnessed what he thought was the ultimate weapon, only to learn it was the ultimate act of mercy. He looked at the small human captain, and for the first time he felt not contempt or suspicion, but a profound and humbling awe. He had been a child playing with sharp stones, while she was a master of a universe he couldn't even see. "Why?" Kalen asked, his voice hoarse. "Why would you do this? For the Vorlag, for us? We are nothing to you." Rostova turned her deep, calm eyes to him. "Because existence is precious, apex strategos, all existence. We learned that lesson through a long and painful history. We nearly annihilated ourselves countless times over trivial matters of territory and pride. We looked into the abyss of our own making, and we chose to step back. When we finally reached for the stars, we did so with a single, unifying conviction, that we would be custodians, not conquerors. We would be shepherds, not wolves." She paused, and the silence in the room seemed to hold the weight of ages. "The silence is spreading. It is not natural. It is ancient, and it is relentless. We do not know what it is or why it exists. But we have seen it consume dozens of civilizations, many of whom are far older and more powerful than your dominion. We track it. We study it, and where we can, we offer refuge to those in its path. We were in the Tenebris system because our long-range sensors indicated a high probability of the Vorlag refugees crossing into your territory. We hoped to avert a conflict. We arrived too late to prevent the battle, but not too late to prevent a mutual annihilation." The full, staggering truth finally settled over Kalen. Humanity wasn't a new power on the galactic stage. They were an ancient, hidden force, moving through the shadows of the cosmos on a mission of breathtaking scope and nobility. They weren't a rival to the Cathar Dominion. The Cathar Dominion was barely a speck on the map of their true concerns. The war with the Vorlag, the conflict. CT that had consumed his empire for a generation was a minor footnote in a much older, much larger, and much more terrifying story. You have faced this silence before?" Lyra asked, her voice trembling with the scale of the revelation. "For centuries," Rostova replied, her expression somber. "Every species we have encountered has either been a victim of the silence or is not yet aware that they are in its path. It is the great unifying truth of this galaxy. In the face of it, our petty squabbles over systems and resources are meaningless. There is only one conflict that matters, the struggle of existence against absolute oblivion." Kalen looked from the map of the encroaching void to the calm, determined face of the human captain. He saw no weakness in her frail form, only a strength that dwarfed his own. The strength of purpose, of conviction, of a perspective born from seeing the true, terrifying shape of the universe. He had come here seeking answers about a strange ship, and he had found the answer to a question he had never even thought to ask. What is the purpose of a civilization? It was not to conquer, it was to endure and to help others endure. "What do you want from us?" Kalen asked, the question now stripped of all pride and suspicion. It was a genuine, humble inquiry. "Nothing," Rostova answered simply. "And everything. We want you to understand. We want you to see the true enemy. We want you to survive. The silence is moving slowly, but it is moving inexorably. Your dominion lies on its projected path. In a few hundred of your years, it will reach your borders. We offer you the knowledge we have gathered. The sensor data, the patterns, the failed theories. We offer you a place in a growing alliance of species, a conclave of survivors, dedicated to understanding and, if possible, confronting this threat." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze intense and unwavering. "We cannot offer you victory, apex strategos. We do not know if victory is even possible, but we can offer you a choice. You can continue to build your empire of honor and strength, a magnificent sandcastle that will inevitably be washed away by the coming tide. Or you can join us and help build a lighthouse, a beacon of knowledge and shared existence that might withstand the storm." The choice was laid bare. It was a choice between a proud, glorious death and a humble, uncertain struggle for life. For the Cathar, a people defined by their pride, it was the most difficult choice imaginable. But Kalen, looking at the creeping darkness on the map, knew there was no choice at all. He had led his people to the edge of an abyss. This small, quiet human was offering them a rope. He rose from his chair, a gesture mirrored by Vaughn and Lyra. He stood to his full, imposing height, towering over the human captain. But for the first time, he did not feel superior. He felt small, humbled, and yet for the first time since he had seen the recording of his fleet's destruction, he felt a flicker of something he had thought lost forever: hope. "Captain Rostova," he said, his voice resonating with a new, sober gravity. "The Cathar Dominion accepts your offer. We will join your conclave." The return to the asterisk indomitable will asterisk was as silent as the journey out, but the nature of the silence had changed. It was no longer the silence of tension and fear, but of profound, world-altering contemplation. Kalen stood on his bridge, watching the emissary hang in the void, no longer an object of terror, but a symbol of a reality far vaster than he had ever conceived. He had gone to confront a potential enemy and had found the only true ally his people might ever have. Back in the Obsidian Spire, his address to the full Dominion Council was met with stunned disbelief, which slowly gave way to a dawning, collective horror and then a grim, sober resolve. He showed them the humans' maps, the data on the silence, the truth of the Vorlag. He spoke of humanity's mission, their ethics, their quiet, staggering power used not for conquest but for preservation. The pillars of Cathar society, honor through strength, glory through conquest, crumbled to dust in the face of this new, terrifying context. General Vaughn, his voice heavy with the weight of his new understanding, was the first to support the apex strategos, his endorsement silencing the last vestiges of the old, prideful way of thinking. A new age had dawned for the Cathar, an age not of dominance, but of partnership. Weeks turned into months. The emissary remained, a silent partner as more human ships arrived. They were all different, each with a unique design, but all shared the same seamless, dark hull and the same quiet, purposeful crews. They were not a fleet in the military sense. They were a flotilla of scholars, scientists, and archivists. They shared their knowledge freely. Cathar engineers and scientists worked alongside humans, their minds reeling from the paradigm mess. Shifting technologies and physical principles that were casually explained to them. The humans spoke of things like zero-point energy as a trivial power source, of information-based reality, of consciousness as a fundamental force of the universe. Lyra thrived in this new environment, spending every waking moment in communion with the human archivists, her intellect soaring to heights she had never dreamed possible. Kalen found himself in long, philosophical discussions with Captain Rostova, learning the history of her species, a history of brutal, savage conflict that had forged in them an unbreakable will to seek peace and unity. He learned that their calm was not a lack of emotion, but a mastery of it, a discipline born from a past filled with terrible mistakes. Their power was not a gift. It was a burden of responsibility they had shouldered for millennia. One cycle, Rostova invited Kalen back aboard the Asterisk emissary for a private meeting. She led him to a different chamber, one deeper within the ship. The air here was colder, the light dimmer. The room was a perfect sphere, and as they entered, the surface of the sphere came alive with swirling, chaotic data. It was raw sensor information, unprocessed and violent. "We have made a breakthrough," Rostova said, her usual calm tinged with a rare note of gravity. "For a long time we believed the silence was a weapon or a mindless, expanding phenomenon, a great filter, as our old philosophers would say. We were wrong." She gestured, and a single point of data in the swirling chaos was isolated and amplified. It was a signal, a faint, impossibly ancient, and profoundly complex signal buried deep within the null field of the silence itself. It was not a broadcast. It was more like an echo, the ghost of a thought resonating in the void. "What is it?" Kalen asked, his senses overwhelmed by the sheer wrongness of the patterns he was seeing. "It is a message, or a warning, or perhaps a memory," Rostova said. "Our linguists have been trying to decode its foundational structure. It's not based on mathematics or physics, but on something far more fundamental, the logic of a mind that architected universes." She looked at Kalen, her eyes reflecting the ghostly light of the signal. "The silence is not the true threat, apex strategos. It is merely the shadow of the threat. It is the wake left by something passing through our reality." She brought up an image, a reconstruction based on the signal's faint topographical data. It was a structure, a thing of impossible scale and non-Euclidean geometry located in the absolute void between galaxies. It was a dark, silent edifice that seemed to twist and fold in on itself, a shape that hurt the mind to look upon. "We believe this is the source," Rostova whispered. "A megastructure of unknown origin and purpose. And the signal seems to be repeating a single fragmented concept over and over again. The closest translation we have is, the cage is breaking." A chill, colder than the void itself, washed over Kalen. The Vorlag, the silence, the struggles of his own people, all of it was just the rustling of leaves on the outermost branches of a tree whose trunk and roots lay in a dimension of reality he could not fathom. Humanity had not just discovered a cosmic horror, they had found the edge of its prison. "What is in the cage?" Kalen asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We do not know," Rostova replied, her gaze fixed on the impossible structure. "But whatever it is, the silence is the effect of its slow, steady erosion of the reality that contains it. The civilization that built this cage is long gone. Perhaps they were the first victims when it began to fail, and now we are the inheritors of their watch." In that moment, Kalen understood humanity completely. Their calm was the calm of those who have stared into the ultimate abyss and have not flinched. Their ethics were the desperate, necessary shield against the chaos of a universe far more terrifying than any war. Their unity was the only possible response to a threat that targeted not just civilizations, but existence itself. He stood beside the human captain, a Cathar warrior and a human scholar, equals in the face of an inconceivable dread. The fleets of the Cathar Dominion, once instruments of conquest, were being refitted alongside human vessels, their new purpose not to wage war, but to embark on a journey to the edge of all things. They were no longer the Cathar Dominion, a solitary empire of pride. They were a part of something larger, a desperate, hopeful coalition of the living. Kalen looked out at the stars, no longer seeing them as territories to be claimed, but as fragile lights flickering in an encroaching, absolute darkness. His fear was immense, a cold, hard knot in his soul. But it was overshadowed by a new, powerful emotion, a sense of profound, shared purpose. The journey ahead was one into an unknown night, but for the first tea. His people would not be walking it alone. And in that unity, in the quiet, unyielding resolve of the small, soft-skinned beings who had crossed a galaxy to offer a hand, he found the only weapon that might truly matter against the coming silence: hope.